Welcome everyone, another edition of #AskRobPo on a Friday afternoon. We are here to motivate, educate and inspire whoever's watching, listening live, whoever's watching through the platforms. Afterwards, this show is the story of business entrepreneurs, individuals that have gone through life and their journey. And all we're here to do on a Friday is give you a nice, positive, feel-good factor, happiness vibe, so you can go home for the weekend and maybe change that one thing in your life because of something that I've said or something that our special guest has said today that has an impact and allows you to go on and do great things. Super excited today to have Rob Purfield with us from Rob Purfield Associates. Welcome to the show, Rob. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
Thank you. He's going to be sharing with us his special journey, what's taken him to where he is today. He's big in the automotive industry, works with multinationals such as Volvo and Toyota and all their teams, and he engages and allows them to grow and put in systems and operations. It's a really motivational story, have an impact on those businesses. He's going to share with us his story, what took him there, and some of the key lessons and learning points from his professional career and his life that have allowed that to happen. So really excited to hear your story, Rob. Let's give you the platform. Let's give you the opportunity to tell us where you're from, what your background is. Tell us about your journey. How did you end up running the business that you're running and representing multinationals in the specialist area in automotive, that what you're doing. So Rob, thank you so much for joining. Let's hear your story.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I think the first thing to say is, if you'd have asked me 30 years ago, 35 years ago, what would I end up doing, then it wouldn't be what I'm doing now. So the first thing I always think of when I talk to people about careers and where they're going with their career is, don't worry about it, it'll be what it'll be. It's much more about the journey than it is about the destination. And I think that's a challenge. If I go back to my 20s, I had no idea what I was going to do in my 20s. My first career in terms of leaving school, going to college, was as an accountant. And I started out life on Merseyside. That's where I was born and bred and brought up on the Wirral on Merseyside. And academically, I wasn't brilliant, but I knew I was bright. I just didn't resonate with school. But once I'd left school and I got into further education, and academically the environment didn't suit me, so I just decided to get a job and did all of my qualifications either at night school or part-time or whatever they released and things. And I felt fortunate. I started out life as an accountant.
Yeah.
The firm that I worked with was taken over by what was then Arthur Andersen, who were one of the top three. So I kind of felt lucky there, in one sense, that I had Arthur Andersen on my CV until the Enron crisis and all the stuff that destroyed their brand. But that was a really great thing to have on my CV. But also, it limited my career prospects because I wasn't an Andersen pick. So in the end, all of us that were part of the takeover ended up moving on to something else, which prompted me to look at other things. I finished my exams in mid-20s and thought, you know, I'm not sure this is for me. So I'm going to try and do something else, much to the horror of my parents when I phoned them up and said I resigned. I've got a job in a pub and I'm going to work behind the bar in a pub for a bit. Always with the mind that I can always get a job as an accountant somewhere. So it's like providing that foundation for me. But then I ended up selling double glazing door to door. I ended up selling installation, and I only took that job because it gave me a company car. I got a Ford Escort.
Let's go through those 2 points because they're massive. Sorry to interrupt, Rob, but you're a qualified accountant.
Yeah.
Right. You've got your accreditation. You've worked for one of the biggest companies in the world, both by name and brand at that.
Purely by fortune, not by talent. Just being in the right place at the right time.
And you then stop all of that, quit, and go and work in a pub. So let's focus on that moment because it is a pretty big moment. most people possibly wouldn't have done that, or been brave enough to do that, or had the balls to do it. So talk us through how you were comfortable enough, or had the ability, or you weren't scared, or you didn't have any fear to switch from a very high level established career in terms of accounting within itself to being super comfortable working at the pub. Like, think back, how were you comfortable with that whole situation, and why were you not scared of doing it?
Okay, well, the first thing is I was single. So I was living in rented accommodation. I think I was in, where was I at the time? I think I was in Bedford at the time. And I'd been living in Bedford for about 2 years. So I'm single, I've got no kids, I've got no responsibilities, I've got no mortgage. I'm just living the life of a single guy, just enjoying life. So to be fair, it wasn't a massive risk because it just felt right to me. I felt as though I've been studying since the age of 5. You know, I mean, obviously, you know,
Okay, but what did that mean? You felt like you were struggling and it felt right. Like it sounds so easy what you've just said, but what does that even mean?
Well, it just means like, and I couldn't have quantified it at the time, but it was just, the job wasn't necessarily the right fit for me. You know, and the company I was working for at the time were a good company, and I enjoyed it. And the guys were okay, but I didn't wake up in the morning with any absolute desire to do what I was doing. So okay. I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm looking at another 40 years of doing what I'm doing in my mindset at that time. Thinking if I work to 65 and I'm in my mid-20s, I think I was 26 actually, but you know, I basically got 40 years of doing this. Is that what I want to do? And the answer was no.
And the struggling since you were 5, explain that bit.
No, sorry, I think that might be just the microphone. I've been studying since I was 5.
Studying.
I've been doing exams, you know. I went to school, started school at 5 or whatever. I left school, I went to college, I left college, and then I did night school and day release.
I've been studying for 20 years. I'm done with that. I just want to live life. I want to be happy, and I'm not sure this is my path.
Absolutely, yeah. So originally it was just, well, I'm just going to take time out. That time out lasted about 18 months. That wasn't the plan. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but to be fair, it was great fun. I had 4 or 5 pub jobs. I was working in a jazz bar. I was working in a working men's club. I just had this fantastic variety of people, and I did get a buzz out of that. I did wake up every day and want to go to work. I wasn't earning a lot of money, but I didn't need a lot of money because every night was a night out because I was working in a pub. And in those days, working in a pub wasn't like working in a pub now. You know, it wasn't all electronic tills and things. The interaction with customers it was just fantastic. Bar staff were really the entertainers in the pub, and we just had a fantastic time. And from that, I then got coached to go and sell. Somebody said, "You've got a great personality. Have you ever done any selling?" And I said, "No." So, "Well, come and work for me and sell double glazing." So I went and sold double glazing door to door for a short while, which was a great blast, and it was good fun, and I earned reasonable money. But again, it just wasn't for me.
When you say it wasn't for me, is it fair to say you were good at it, but it just wasn't your passion or your love?
Yeah, I thought I was good at it. I look back on it now, I wasn't particularly good at it, but I was okay with the guys I was working with, and I made a living, and it was all okay. But the company I was working for, you know, I'd hesitate to say they were dodgy, but they were a double glazing company, and it was a bit flat by the seat of their pants, and it wasn't a top quality professional double glazing company, and I didn't feel I had it in me to go and apply for one of those jobs because it just wasn't me. And it got to a point, and then I got, you know, and I meet a girl, and it all gets serious, and we start having conversations that I need to settle down and get a proper job or a proper career and do something. I thought, well, the only thing I know really is accountancy. So I go and get a job as an accountant, and that was my introduction to the motor industry. And I get a job for a dealer group here in Hull, which is why I live here up in East Yorkshire now. And I get this job, and I'm a dealer accountant, and then the job comes along, and I say, oh, there's a regional accountant's job going, I'll go for that. So I get that, and I'm a regional accountant, signing checks for all sorts of things, one of which was a sales training course. And it kind of struck me that when I was doing the sales, there was an interlude where I sold typewriters as well, but that was just one of those in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was selling typewriters, and there'll be people listening to this don't even know what a typewriter is. But I was selling typewriters at the time that word processors were coming out. So that was definitely a non-starter. But I was a regional accountant signing these checks for sales training. And I thought, I never really got any sales training. I kept getting these sales jobs, but nobody trained me. They just said, you've got the gift of the gab, or you've got a personality, just go out and sell. And I made a living, but it wasn't fulfilling. So I thought, I'm going on the course. So it was a 3-day course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with all the salespeople went on it, and nobody could understand why the accountant was sat on a sales course. And without wishing to not be humble, but I absolutely destroyed that 3 days. It was just outstanding. And the things that the guy was talking about in terms of persuasion and influence just blew my mind. I didn't know that those kind of techniques were available for one human being talking to another human being. Long story short, I got some rapport with the guy who was running the course, who happened to own the company that we paid to come in and do it. I had dinner with him and his partner, his business partner, a couple of times. We talked about some stuff, and they gave me some career advice and things, and I went back with my head full of different stuff.
Share with us one or two of those techniques that blew you away on that weekend.
Well, one of them is how you phrase the question will dictate the answer. Okay, so a real simple one. Okay, is there's a way to phrase, or there's a questioning technique called using tag questions or tie downs. So if I really, if I'm sat with anybody, I really want you to get to agree with me. All I've really got to do is say something sensible and ask you to agree with me, isn't it? And nod, and you're nodding, and you'll agree with me, won't you? Because if what I'm saying makes sense, you can't possibly not agree with me, can you?
Yeah.
And one of the problems is that most people make sentences. Speak in sentences. And salespeople do it. And I don't know whether you've experienced being face to face with a salesperson, and you've got to one of those tumbleweed moments where you've asked a question, they've answered it, and they stand looking at you, waiting for the next question. And you're not sure whether you should speak or they should speak. So one of the things, for example, and it's lived with me, I'm going back nearly 30 years now, it's lived with me in terms of the key to being influential and the key to actually developing rapport with people is learning to ask questions. And that was rocket science to me at the time, because I'd been an opinionated accountant type person. My personality is a type A, dominant, high achieving, driving kind of personality. And I make lots of statements, or I did do at that time. And then suddenly I realized I need to turn my statements into questions. And that technique of putting a tag question at the end of every statement turns it into a question, doesn't it? And then you agree with me, and then I can move on. So things like that, right? and lots of other things. And I went away and reevaluated how I communicated with people. And then about a month or so later, I get a phone call from this guy who owns the company and says, do you fancy coming to work for us? They've just got a contract with HSBC. They wanted somebody from the world of finance who would make a good consultant and trainer and go in and work with HSBC. That was a bigger decision for me than when I resigned from accountancy in the first place. One of the reasons was I'd met a girl here who's now my long-suffering wife of 30 years, and I had a mortgage, and suddenly the money that he was offering me was a lot less than the money I was earning, but the perks and the potential benefits were greater but unknown in terms of commission and bonuses and all sorts. But anyway, I decided, I sat down and we talked about it, and she said, well, just go and do it if you want to do it. We didn't have any kids at that time. And I always had this thing, and the great thing about doing the accountancy was, I could always get a job as an accountant. And if my mum was still alive, bless her, she passed it a good number of years ago, but if my mum was still alive and you asked her what I do for a living, she'd tell you I was an accountant. And I've not been in an accountancy office since I was 26, other than my own accountants to do my accounts. So I decided to do that. And I think, if you like, the moral of the story in terms of where I am now, where I wouldn't have expected to be, was I actually found my mojo. I took this job. There was some trepidation about it. I wasn't sure about it. I spent 3 months absolutely immersed in trying to learn every technique that the company put forward in their training and their consultancy. And I used to walk around with it. We got it all taped. I used to sit in meetings and ask people questions and tape all of the meetings. And it was in the days before we had wireless headphones and things. And I used to walk around the house with a Walkman on. For those people who are old enough to remember what a Walkman was, with my tape and listening to everything that I could, until I could do it all virtually verbatim. And then the first training course came up that they decided to send me to run, and it had nothing to do with finance. It was a sales training course for a bunch of car salespeople. And I have never been so terrified in my life. And standing in front of that room and watching people who've been selling cars for 20 years looking at me, expecting me to give them some kind of nuggets of gold that they've never heard before. And I went through that 3 days, got to the end of the 3 days, got fantastic reviews, and went to dinner with one of the directors of our company and just sat there absolutely buzzing with electricity, saying, I now know what I'm supposed to do for a living. That's what I want to do every day of my life. And that's what I've done every day of my life since. And I can't remember a time when I've woken up and not wanted to go to work. And honestly, if I could give anybody any advice, and if I go back to when I was 17, 18 and worried about what life holds for me in my 20s, which was a period, and I think the period for lots of people, the 20s are really anxious. It's about finding your way. Don't worry about it. You know, just keep looking until you get that spark that says, this is what I want to do. So then I guess I was what you'd call a bog standard sales trainer. The company I joined was really small. I mean, there were only 4 people in it when I joined. And we went on and we developed that business into being the largest automotive consultancy at that time in the UK. I went on to being sales director and then group managing director. And life was mapped out, and people kept saying to me, you should do this for yourself. Why are you doing it for somebody else? And my honest answer was, why would I? In 1998, I was earning ridiculous amounts of money, and my company car was an Aston Martin DB7. Now, to move from that and go somewhere else, that's a risk, because I thought, well, I'm not going to get an Aston Martin anywhere else. We'd had 2 kids. I'd taken on a ridiculous mortgage. We'd moved house and I bought a bigger house. And then the chairman came in one day and shocked me and said, I'm going to close it down, I'm changing direction. And I went, what do you mean you're changing direction? He said, we're going into, and he went into computer software. And I got to this position of group MD, and I said, well, that just makes me a software salesman, and it's not my bag. What excites me when I get up in the morning is working with people, working with organizations. We've had some great results. We've done a project with Volkswagen where we've taken them from selling in a particular part of their business, their fleet sales. We were part of a process where they went from 12,500 cars a year to 120,000 cars a year, and built the teams and the processes and the communication strategy behind that with the guys from Volkswagen. So that's what kind of lit my boat. So at that time, I came home and it was one of those seminal moments again, sat down with the wife and I said, listen, all this, it's going, the car's going back next week. I've handed my papers in, I'm done. And she says, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to do it myself. And it happened, the sales director at the time, and he was somebody I brought into the company and kind of followed on my coattails. As I got promoted, he fell into my position. We sat down and talked about it, and we went into partnership. And sat down with a piece of paper, listed everybody that we knew, everybody that we'd worked with, phoned them up and said, this is what we're doing, this is what we can bring to the party, and started our own business. And then started working with people like Volvo and Toyota. We did a massive amount of work that doesn't gain any credibility anymore in the world with MG Rover, and with some fantastic results with MG Rover. Of course, eventually that company disappeared, so it doesn't sit well on the CV. But I then did that for 8 years, and then got challenged because the guy that I was in partnership with, who'd been through my journey with the previous company, which was 10 years, so I'd done 18 years with this guy. And we got to a point where we were just like an old married couple. We shared an office. We had a team of consultants out in the field doing some great stuff. We were doing well, but we could walk into the office and spend 8 hours in the office and not speak to each other. like a real old married couple. We just get in, get behind our laptops, do our thing, do our phone calls, go out and do our meetings, come back, and we just weren't communicating. And I think basically we just run our course as a partnership. So I took that decision again. I sat down, I looked at it, and I said to the wife, I got up one morning, I said, I'm going in today and I'm going to tell him I've had enough, I'm not doing this anymore. And she said, what does that mean? I said, well, I'm not bothered. He can have the brand, he can have the customers, he can have everything. We'll find a way through it, but I'm done. So I would have been 50 at that stage. And so she said, okay, let's do that. So the kids would have been around about teenagers, just going into secondary school. So I went in and I sat down with him, and I don't think it was a surprise. I think the way I approached it might have surprised him. Anyway, long story short, we come out of that, and that was great. And that was just before Christmas in 2008. So the other thing that complicates that story is we're in the middle of the biggest financial crash there's ever been. We're going into the biggest recession we've seen since the start of the previous century. And I just thought, you know, if I can't wake up in the morning and feel excited about going, what's the point in going? So we called a halt to that. I sat down. That Christmas was the least stressful Christmas I'd ever had, because every year for the previous 20 years, coming up to Christmas was always about what contracts have we got next year, how are we going to match the overheads. It was all about budgets, it was all about planning, it was all about that sort. And because of my accountancy background, I was always heavily involved in those kind of things and those conversations. And I knew more than most people probably should know in their own business about the financial constraints. Every Christmas was stressful for me. I used to spend, after we'd done the festivities, I'd go away in a dark corner and start crunching numbers and phoning people and saying, we need this, where are we at with this account? So I was playing the double role. I was playing sales and finance. But this particular year, I said, well, I'm done, and I'm not doing anything till we've done Christmas. So we got through Christmas, and it was the first time ever I can remember having a blank diary. So I had no clients, I had no income, I had nothing showing at all. And I just did the same thing that I did previously. I just wrote out a list of people that I knew and phoned them up and said, do you fancy a coffee? Drove around, had coffee with lots of people and said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And my plan was purely and simply to become an independent consultant. And that's what I've done. And I, for the last 12 years or 13 years now, in 2021, proactively avoided collecting overhead. So I've got a team of associates that I work with, that if I get a project either that I can't do or I don't want to do, or isn't within my skill set, then I've got a team of associates who are all self-employed doing their own thing. And I bring those in and create teams when I need to create teams. But basically, I just work on my own initiative, do my own stuff. And it's been the best thing that I've ever done in the last 10 years. It's just been phenomenal. And still I get up every day and want to do it. And then we get the pandemic, and just, you know, throwing in some stuff that we did there. That particular one as an independent consultant, I mean, the most exciting project I got was Opel Europe. And that came about quirkily because I was doing some stuff for Vauxhall, but I wasn't doing a lot with Vauxhall, I was doing bits and pieces. And they had somebody that had cried off going to a meeting in Rüsselsheim, just outside of Frankfurt in Germany, because Opel owned Vauxhall, or Opel still owned Vauxhall. Opel Vauxhall is the same company. So I'd fly out to Germany to sit in Opel's office and get involved in this meeting. I'd throw in a few comments and questions, ask them stuff, and then they phoned me up and asked me to go back to Opel to sit down and look at this pan-European thing, 29 countries, 6,500 people, and would I be the lead communicator, the master trainer on that project to design all the comms and everything and how we run all that out. And that was a 5-year journey that was just phenomenal. And that only came to an end because Peugeot Citroën bought Opel out, and suddenly, instead of being owned by General Motors and everything's in English, and I'm owned by Peugeot Citroën and everything's in French. And I don't speak French. So
I mean, Rob, your story is just amazing, and it is truly inspiring. And you know the thing I love the most, and I just love how you were brave enough to understand what makes you happy and then just make decisions on that basis. And most people go through life so scared of making the decisions and not being happy that until it's too late, suddenly life has gone. Whereas from the age of 25 or 26, you've clearly understood that you need to live your journey and live it the way you want to live it. Now, I don't know if that's a fair reflection and that's the way you look at it now.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you, if I go back to school, if I go back to my school days, and I wasn't great at school, I just didn't, and a lot of that was to do with the school at the time and where I lived and things. But I can remember being in a careers meeting with no idea what I wanted to do, so I said I'd join the Navy. And I went to a school where everybody that was there was expected to go off and be a welder or a pipe fitter or a plumber or a joiner, etc. And I have no problem with that. The world needs pipe fitters, welders, plumbers. That's just not my bag. And I knew it wasn't. And I had a very clear idea of what my lifestyle should be like as I went through life. So I just, it wasn't what am I going to do for a living, what am I going to do for a job? It was how do I want to feel when I'm working? What is it like? And my abstract view at the age of 15, 16 was I wanted to travel and I wanted to sit in meetings and I wanted to influence people. And I knew that as an intuitive. I probably even couldn't articulate it at that time. I just knew that that's what I want. And I would say to anybody, yeah, any youngsters, the people who listen to this or watch this webinar, is just sit quietly for a moment and think about what do you want your life to be? And then just follow that, just intuitively follow that. If you're not doing something that is taking you towards that, then don't do it. Because
well, I got to ask you a really big question on that point. Okay? And I, for sure, live my life wanting to serve, help others, and allow other people grow and achieve and have success. Pretty much exactly what you just said, slightly different words, but the same theory, let's call it.
yeah.
Now, where does money and financial reward either come into the equation or conflict with that? So if I share with you, from my perspective, I am happy helping others, supporting others, helping people further their careers, their lives, their businesses, grow, develop. That's what makes me happy. Giving back, helping others makes me happy, full stop. So the financial side, I have no regard for, because that's not what makes me happy. Can you share with us throughout your career and your decisions, what is your viewpoint on the helping of the others and serving that role to the financial rewards?
Okay, so a piece of life coaching, if you like, a bit of life advice, and I've got a son who's 27, who's kind of off on that. You know, he did the university. When he finished university, he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He got first in maths. He didn't know whether to work or whether to travel. And I said, well, it's a no-brainer, just go and travel. He's more analytical than I am, and he worried about, yeah, but all the jobs, the guys who are leaving now will be getting all the jobs. And I said, don't worry about the jobs will still be there when you come back, go and travel. And he went off for a year and traveled the world and worked in all kinds of weird places and came home and has got himself a good job now and is on a career path. And the basic advice is this: if you're good at anything, the finances will take care of themselves. So whatever you do, just do it brilliantly. And it doesn't matter what you do for a living. You can earn whatever living you want to earn by being brilliant at what you do. You know, if what makes you buzz in the morning is being a swamp diver, set yourself the task of being the best swamp diver in the world, and you'll make a living at it. If you're just average, if you just go with the flow, if you just punch your ticket, then that's what will happen. When I said to you, when I started, when I left the accountancy job in the motor trade and I got the job in training, I didn't just get a job in training and turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning and do the things they asked me to do. I proactively pushed people into meetings and said, how do we do this? How do we do that? What happens in this situation? And I take those meetings and I listen to it. I got all the training courses and I went through, My wife, by the time I'd done those 3 months, she wasn't my wife then, she was my girlfriend, but she lived with me. My wife, at the end of those 3 months of doing that, was as knowledgeable as I was. We didn't watch TV or do anything. I used to get home and I'd say, right, is tonight's task, I need to learn this and I need to learn it verbatim. So she had to sit with the books, or she had to sit and listen to the tapes, and then I had to say it back to her, and she would judge me and say, no, you've missed this bit out, you've missed that bit out. And that was a 24/7 virtually. I used to go to sleep at night with the earphones in the belief that I could subliminally take these things in while I was sleeping.
So on the back of that, and loads of people asking questions, we're probably going to overrun by 5 or 10 minutes if you're okay for time.
Yeah, I know.
One of your nuggets before was the tag at the end of the question or asking questions.
Yeah.
It seems like you're the type of person that has always asked questions anyway. So let's break the two things down. So there's one thing, asking questions, which you always do, whether in your mind or asking people how to do something. That's maybe something instinctive that you've always had. So the technique and the change was how the questions were communicated and the tag on the end of the question.
Yeah. I mean, asking questions. I mean, I would say to anybody, just ask questions. Always ask questions. Never be afraid of asking a dumb question. And everybody will have sat in meetings where somebody said, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There genuinely isn't. The only dumb people are the people who don't ask questions. If you've got a question that you think is really stupid, I will guarantee you there are other people thinking the same. And they will be so relieved that you asked the question. And even if somebody says to you that's a stupid question, just ignore what they say and take the feedback. You've always, my perception is, we've always got to be striving for what is it that I don't know, because you can't do anything with stuff that you don't know. You know, if I don't know what I don't know, then I can't do anything about that. So whenever I get into a situation, two things I would say: when you get a job, once you've got a job, that's the easy part. What you've now got to look at is what's the next job that you want. So if you get a job as an intern somewhere, or you get a job as a trainee somewhere, or as a junior, or you walk into it, the first thing is, what's the next ladder on my career path? And what do I need to know to be able to do that? And who knows what I need to know? And how do I go and find out? And start working towards your next job. Be brilliant at the job you've got, but presumably you're qualified for that because you've got it. So just be brilliant. You know, whether it's making tea or filing, if you're going to make tea, find out, well, everybody you make tea, how do they like their tea? I had one job where, and I'm going back a lot of years, but I worked in an office and I noticed that the chairman used to get in about 10 minutes after me. And he used to make himself a cup of tea. So I just got into the habit of making the chairman a cup of tea every morning. As soon as he came in, I say, Mike, what do you want a tea? Found out how he liked his tea, made his tea exactly. And even if you met him now, he lives in the Isle of Man somewhere. Even if you met him now, Mike would say, I make the best tea in England. Right? Because I made the tea, I found out how he liked it, and I made it. And what that gave me every morning is an opportunity to sit down with the chairman of the company. And I was nowhere near the chairman of the company at that time. The chairman of the company, sit down and have a cup of tea for 10, 15 minutes every morning and just talk about life.
Love that. Very similar to me and my journey. I was very fortunate to work at a company called CBRE, the largest real estate property company in the world. And for the first 3 years, I got to go to breakfast every morning with the MD. So I didn't have to make him breakfast, but I was lucky enough. And all he did was talk every morning at breakfast. And I just sat there and listened to everything that he said. And he was 25 years more experienced and had more knowledge. And so all I just did was thought, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's been around the block. All I have to do is go for breakfast every morning and listen to him, and I'll go a long way. And that was the best training and learning and relationship I probably ever had, because I was just getting the best knowledge from a wonderful human being and individual. So I think those moments in life, like you just said, you just don't forget that interaction with someone, a senior, an MD, an owner. They stay with you forever. All right, we've got to get through the questions, Rob. There's so many questions here. We're going to have to quick fire them. What do you think about technology in the industry? And are you still learning new technology skills, and how does that affect your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, technology, I mean, is just about the most exciting thing going on. I wish I was a teenager again. People complain about teenagers and technology, just what a world to live in at the moment. It's going to change completely. Yeah, I think you have to learn new technology just to live. I mean, I'm about to launch a podcast series, so I've had to learn technology around sound editing, film editing, how do I market digitally for podcasts. Everything is technology driven at some level. So yeah, it's a continuous journey. But the answer to that is I'm not just learning technology. I'm still learning persuasion and influence. I'm still learning. I've been studying psychology, behavioral psychology since 2003. I finished my formal training in behavioral psychology and stuff back in 2012, but continually look at what people are doing and how that works. So life is a full journey of learning.
Brilliant. 2 techniques you want to share with us today? Next question.
2 techniques. I'm going to be more specific. Techniques to do what? If you want techniques to persuade people, I'll give you a reference point. If people are really interested in persuasion and influence, there's a book by a guy called Robert Cialdini, and it's called, I think it's called The Science of Influence and Persuasion. And there are 6 key things that he talks about in there. The number one that I think people can take away and use for this is reciprocity. Whatever you do to other people, they will look for opportunities to do back to you. The simplest is if you smile at somebody, they'll smile at you, typically. And if you just keep doing things, if you go and piss people off, sorry, the language, if you go and cheese people off and do the wrong things, they'll look for opportunities to do that back to you. So think about reciprocity as a big technique.
Trust in the journey is a key element to all of the Q&As that we do. You have already said that. What's your view on a lot of youth nowadays suffering from anxiety and problems?
I think that's massive, and particularly if you look at where we're at with the pandemic and things. The best advice I can give to people is control the controllables. The stuff outside that you can't control. If you think you've got some problems or anxieties or whatever, make a list of them, tick off the ones that you can control, and just work on those. And life's it's a domino effect. Deal with your small problems first. I read something the other day. I think it was a Facebook meme or something. I can't remember whether it was a fox and a horse, I think, trying to get through a forest. And the fox said, it's too dark, I can't see where I'm going. And the horse said to the fox, can you see the next step? And he said, yeah. He said, well, just take that one. And I think that would be my best advice for everybody. If you can see the next step, just take that one. Whatever you're struggling with, find something that you can control and just do the next one. I had a situation in my career where, as Group MD, our finance director had not been performing well, but we didn't know. And he'd been providing us with management accounts, and we looked as though we were great. And then he came in one day and he said, I've got to tell you, we're going to lose X thousand, well, it was X 100,000 this month. And that just didn't compute in my mind because I knew where we were at. And I said, I don't understand. What does that mean? And he told me and left the room. And I thought, this could be terminal for the business. I had one of those moments where I had brain freeze. I really didn't know what to do next. And I sat there, and at the risk of the company going down, there need to be massive negotiations and reformatting the restructuring the finances. The only thing I could think to do that I knew I could control was to complete my expenses. I broke the brain lock. I sat down and I spent 20 minutes doing my expenses, which I never used to do, by the way. My PA used to do my expenses for me, but they were there with the receipts and they needed to. And I thought, I'll just do that, just to do something because I could control it. So in terms of the trust, in terms of anxiety and all that, just do the next thing, control the controllables.
So in the next question from that one is, do you have like 5 or 10-year plans in your head of when you're going into a new job or a career or a path or life? How do you formulate things?
So, the clever answer to that is, I sit down every 5 years and reevaluate and have a 10-year plan and stuff. I have an idea of what I'm trying. My idea of what I'm trying to achieve is a lifestyle. I've never wanted to be rich, which is probably just as well. But I'm wealthy enough. I don't need to work anymore. I'm in a great position. But my goal was always to have enough money to be able to do what I want to do when I wake up in the morning. In terms of having plans, my real plans are: 1, am I in a place where I'm really enjoying what I do? And 2, what's the next step? And just take the next step. It's a bit like compound interest. Just add a little bit, and add a little bit. If you get 1% better every day, you'll be 365% better by the end of the year. Don't try and be 365% better. Just take the next step.
A bit of marginal gains there.
Yeah, marginal gains, yeah.
Next question, Rob. 2 key words in communication techniques that you can share with us. And I know you gave an example before, but let's throw in another couple of positive ones.
Okay, the number 1 word in persuasion techniques is you. So if I'm talking to you, Rob, then I want to talk about you. The word I'll try and avoid is me, all right? Because you're not really interested in me. So I talk about WIIFM, which is the world's #1 radio station. Everybody listens to WIIFM. And what it stands for is what's in it for me.
Yeah.
So if you want to persuade people and influence people, then talk in their terms, understand what their motives are, understand what their motivation is, and talk in those terms. And people will go with you, because it's all about other people. When you talk about you, nobody really cares. You know, people who suffer with anxiety in terms of have I made a fool of myself and what happens if this happens, what happens, they're fooling themselves if they think the world cares. Nobody really thinks that any other individual is more important than themselves.
Love that. Last question from the group, then we're going to ask you for what you want to do in the future and what impact you want to have on the world, and a message, positive message for everyone for the weekend. So last question here, how do you relax your mind when you have so much responsibility?
Ask me that question again, sorry.
How do you relax your mind when you take on so much responsibility? How can you be relaxed and calm?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things. One, in just about every job that I've been in, when I've got that kind of responsibility, I enjoy it. Right? And that's another thing about, if you're going to get up in the morning and go somewhere for 40 years and you know, build your career and make a living, if you're doing something that you enjoy, then it's kind of relaxing anyway, even when it goes wrong. You know, the situation that I was just told you about, the finance director, the sales director, I can remember driving home and we were sharing a car and he said, so what are you going to do? I said, well, I'll just show the world that I'm the best finance director that we've ever employed. I just don't have the title. And I didn't kind of get stressed about it. I thought, okay, well, I just need to deal with that. And if it hadn't been me, then I'd have gone out and employed somebody else to be that. If the question is, what do I do outside of work? Then I mess around with a guitar. If there's anybody that's listening that plays a musical instrument and plays guitar, then I'm a man who owns guitars. If nobody listening plays guitar, then I play guitar. And that's what I do, because I can't play the guitar and think about anything else, because I'm not that good, so I have to focus on that. And I would suggest to everybody, you need something to take your mind off work. You need somewhere where you can go mentally away from the day-to-day stress of life.
Rob, we could talk for hours, because really your story, your journey is just a brilliant one. And what impact do you want to have on the world? What are your plans moving forward? And what positive message do you have for everyone to go home with or stay home with this weekend?
If I had a dream in terms of how I can influence the world going forward, it would be to fix the divisive nature of modern politics. But that's a whole new topic that we will get into. In terms of career-wise, to be honest, I've got to an age where, you know, the pandemic, I feel fortunate to be as old as I am during the pandemic, because I'm not trying to build a career. And I think the last 12 months has been really difficult for people in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s, because there's been this hiatus. Lots of people have taken the opportunity to reinvent themselves. So I think moving forwards, my goal really is to help everybody that is on the journey that I'm kind of coming to the end of. And if I can spend the next 10 years sharing any nuggets of wisdom or support for people, then that'll make me happy. If I make some money as well, that'll be great, but it is what it is.
Brilliant. And positive message for the weekend?
Positive, I think on the basis of what we've been talking about is, A, just do what you want to do. The world is yours. If you get into the world of quantum physics, nothing exists until you put your attention on it. So make sure you're putting your attention on the right things and go and create the life you want to create.
Brilliant. Rob, absolute legend. I'm you know, listening to you is just fascinating. Love to carry on for hours and hours and hours, and you know, you've got so much wisdom, very humble, and so much knowledge and so many nuggets to share. So Good luck with everything you do, Rob. Thanks for joining today. Sorry we took an extra 15 minutes of your time. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for all the brilliant questions. We will see you same time, same place next week. Have a great weekend. Keep following, keep sharing on all the platforms. Super grateful for that. And everyone take care and be well. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers. Have a good weekend, everybody. Cheers. Bye.